Well, there's kicking, and there's punching, and there's holding. Pretty much anything goes. It is called ultimate fighting, and it could be the ultimate end of boxing. It is already a huge moneymaker. With us now, the man who just won Ultimate Fighting Heavyweight Championship last weekend, Randy Couture. Randy, good to have you.
Thank you.
You know, I've interviewed presidents and some bigwigs, but no tough questions for you.
I appreciate that.
Well, because you're going to beat me up. So, what's the draw? Why has it gotten so big?
I think there's just so many dimensions and aspects to our sport that it's very intriguing. Every single matchup is interesting, from the very first fight on the card to the main event. And there's so many different ways to win a fight, and athletes come from so many different backgrounds that it's very interesting.
I've talked to a lot of very young people, Randy, who you would think in years past when I was younger would be boxing fans who like fighting, that they say boxing is boring compared to this. And doesn't boxing know it? Its revenues are going down. Ultimate Fighting's revenues, pay-per-view events are going up. What do you make of that?
I mean, it's hard to say. It just seems like there's no real big, huge stars in boxing right now that used to capture the imagination of people. I mean, I grew up on boxing. I grew up watching Muhammad Ali and, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard and so many of those guys that everybody got together to watch those fights on the weekends. And that's the way our sport has kind of become now. People are interested in seeing us fight in the matchups.
But they couldn't, you know, kick and do a lot of the things that you could do. So is this sort of like boxing and wrestling sort of unshackled, and that's what made it a draw?
Well, boxing is a small piece of what we do. Most of us train in boxing or kickboxing, but that's only a small piece of the puzzle. There's the ground fighting, there's the clinch fighting, and all the other pieces, and I think those other dimensions are what makes our sport interesting.
Well, what's your secret? Now, you're beating the you-know-what out of this guy, and he looks like he's twice your size.
He's a big guy.
Yeah.
My last fight, I moved back up to heavyweight, which is where I started in the sport.
Now, what's heavyweight in your sport? What's the range?
From 205 to 265.
Right. And you're not a spring chicken. That's again, that's the toughest question when I ask. What, you're 44?
43. I'll be 44 in June.
Now, that's ancient in most sports, but not in this one.
Yeah, especially for combative sports.
Yeah.
I think the wrestling nature of our sport has allowed me some longevity where some of the other combative sports, they don't last as long.
You've had a lot of anti-violent groups, as you know, Randy, say that this is something that shouldn't be sanctioned or allowed. It comes into communities where a lot of kids watch, and that gives the wrong impression. What do you say to that?
I think it's an uneducated point of view. I think our sport is very tactical, very technical, a lot of discipline. You know, I have schools that we cater to kids that come and learn the technique, self-defense, and physical discipline that comes from our sport.
So there's more discipline to this than there would be for boxing?
I think both sports are very disciplined. They're just different. Our sport encompasses all the things that could happen in a potential altercation. It's a great form of physical fitness and self-defense.
What's scary about this sport to me, Rand, is that, you know, in boxing there seem to be general kind of rules. There are no rules, and actually, anything goes.
That's
right?
not actually accurate. There are a lot of rules. There's
tell me one, because this one looks like there are no rules going on here right now.
Over 20 rules.
Really? Well, give me some that taboos.
Well, the obvious things like biting and eye gouging, striking to the throat, striking to the back of the head or neck. No kicking an opponent who's down, no headbutting, no small joint manipulation, which is you can't grab fingers and toes.
No biting off ears.
Yeah, that's
so Mike Tyson might have a tough time with this, right?
He'd probably choke to death.
Are a lot of traditional boxers going from this, from boxing to this?
There have been some boxers.
They don't do well, though, right?
Well, it's all about learning the other pieces. If you have a glaring weakness, somebody's going to point it out to you, and it's not usually fun.
What is your take on how this became a big pay-per-view event? It was one thing when in the early days, I remember, had difficulty filling just gyms, let alone stadiums.
Yeah, well,
that's not a problem now.
Yeah, when I started, there were 1,000, 1,500 people at the event, and now we're getting 5,000 people just to the weigh-ins, let alone the events. So we just sold out Nationwide Arena in Columbus with 19,000 plus people, and
not a small place.
I think the word is spread. People get our sport.
What about advertisers? Do they get your sport? Have they approached you and said, Randy, you know, we don't know what to make of Ultimate Fighting, but we know you're a big deal? It's
coming. I think we're getting more and more corporate sponsorships now as fighters. There's a few that have jumped on the UFC bandwagon and are sponsoring the events, and that's getting better. I think the water is warming, so to speak, but there's still just a few niche, you know, nutrition and some of those things that.
So it hasn't crossed the Pepsi or
not yet.
General Foods.
I just had 24-hour Fitness, which is, you know, a pretty big corporate sponsor for fighting.
Do you think that in this day and age, Ultimate Fighting has got to be leery of doing what happened to boxing. In other words, you have, what, 8 different heavyweight champs today because you have IBF and WBA and WBC, that you guys are trying to avoid that. But there's temptations to that, right?
Well, there are other shows popping up, other people trying to promote the sport. I think the UFC has done a great job of taking a lot of the money that they're making and putting it back into the sport and trying to grow the sport, not just nationally here in the U.S., but internationally. And I think that's going to ensure the longevity of the sport and keep it pretty pure. That's our hope.
Does it bother you, though, at 43 or whatever, that the real big money might come after you've peaked?
That's the way it goes. I mean, I've certainly made a very comfortable living for myself, and I do this because I love it.
What did you make for that last fight?
The numbers still aren't in yet, but you know, I make 6 figures.
Ka-ching, ka-ching. Not bad. When in the beginning they used to have to pay in bottle caps, right? Now look at you. All right, Randy, very good seeing you. We wish you well.
Thank you very much.
And I know you gave me some angry looks there, so I don't know what to make of that. Randy Couture, he is the champ, the ultimate champion.